Rudy's Revelation.
Hey everyone, sorry for that miscue starting up this morning. It is Monday. That's probably why. Monday, November 10th, 2025. Welcome to the podcast today.
Tune sound.
So, Democrats have caved on the shutdown. Is there a catch? And there might be. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And also, The Blaze has published this article implicating a Capitol police officer in the January 6th bombing case. 5 Democrat senators break ranks on a vote for a clean continuing resolution, but there may be a catch, as I just spoke of. And so The Blaze published this fringe study that connects a former Capitol police officer and a professional women's soccer player to the January 6th pipe bomber. And so we're going to talk about that article as well. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to get in the headlines in just a second. A little slow this morning. It is Monday. I hope everybody had a good weekend. So let's read the news. We're going to start out with PJ Media. Democrats finally caved and lost everything in the shutdown showdown. That might not necessarily be true. But PJ Media goes on to name the senators who broke ranks. Senator August King, independent of Maine. John Fetterman, obviously we know that, Democrat of Pennsylvania. Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada. Jean Sheehan of New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire, Jackie Rosen, New Mexico, and surprisingly, Tim Kaine of Virginia. The retiring Dick Durbin, who's a high-ranking Democrat who's going to be retiring, was leading the breakaway group, the bloc of Democrats who decided to break with the rest of the Democrats. So that's interesting, but there is a caveat today, and we're going to talk about what exactly that is. So let's move on with the headlines here. We're going to go to a New York Times article that covers the shutdown and their take on it. Senate moves towards ending shutdown after Democrat defectors relent. A small but critical group of defectors backed legislation to fund the government, providing the votes to move forward with a spending package that would end the shutdown in the coming days. I'm going to get into a Fox News article that is going to flesh this out a little bit. We're not really sure because it hasn't been confirmed, because a lot of these articles talk about the senators breaking ranks and this, that, and the other thing, but they don't talk about why they did it. The Senate, according to the New York Times, the Senate on Sunday night took the first step towards ending the longest shutdown in U.S. history after a group of Democrats broke their party's blockade and voted with Republicans to advance the legislation to reopen the government. I want to pause right here and said, even the New York Times admitted it was the Democrats who were shutting down the government. A group of Democrats broke with their party's blockade. It was the Democrats' blockade, and voted with Republicans to advance legislation to reopen the government. So if there are any Democrats or liberals out there listening to this, be clear that it was not the Republicans they wanted to shut down. There's a lot of budget things that are having to be negotiated, understanding the filibuster. Obviously, they needed these extra votes to pass any legislation. So you need a 60-40 vote, as it stands now, to open the government or to pass anything else. So they decided to keep the government open. The Republicans did, and put forth this clean CR and said, Well, we'll discuss other budgetary items after we pass this. That's how CRs work. You keep the government open while you debate policy. Okay, so New York Times goes on to say a 60-40 vote paved the way for the spending agreement to begin making its way through Congress, where it will still need to be debated and passed by the Senate when approval in the House and be signed by President Trump to bring the shutdown to a close. President Trump will sign it. He was even talking about getting rid of the filibuster, which, you know, the Senate is not going to do. Whatever you think about the filibuster, it lets the weaker party have at least some sort of debate leverage. Now, here's what I want to get to here, was this article that came out yesterday. This is Fox News. Senate Democrats, Republicans reach deal to reopen the government. Senate Republicans unveil three-bill minibus in bid to reopen the government. Now, the other articles weren't talking about this. The latest development comes after an updated continuing resolution was revealed that would reopen the government until January 30th, 2026. Reverse fire. Now, listen to this here. Reverse firings of furloughed workers. Now, this is a gimme to the Democrats. When previously you saw PJ Media, maybe they didn't do their research, or maybe this isn't even part of the deal. Reverse firings of furloughed workers carried out by the Trump administration, not all. It doesn't have any specifics here. And ensure that the furloughed workers get back pay. That might be something that will be done, I imagine. Goes on to say, the Senate Appropriations Committee released a three-bill spending package known as a minibus Sunday afternoon. Lawmakers are still waiting on the text for an updated continuing resolution, the CR, that, if passed, is expected to reopen the government until late January. It has passed. The Senate has voted, and I believe it has passed. It includes legislation that would fund military construction and the VA, the legislative branch, and the agriculture and the Food and Drug Administration. So we don't really know any of this side agreement. This is only Fox News reporting this. So for the Republicans that are dancing on their chairs right now, be clear that there may be, and we knew that Republicans were working on something to sweeten the pot. There was earlier talk about them working on some sort of healthcare gimme, but it looks like this is the minibus that may, mind you, be following the vote today. Article goes on to say Senate Republicans view the package as a sweetener that they hope attracts enough Senate Democrats to break through the logjam and move forward towards reopening the government. And given that the minibus is largely a bipartisan product, lawmakers believe it could succeed. Again, this was earlier. This is from yesterday. Senate Majority Leader John Thune made it clear in the past few days that he would not put a bill on the floor that did not have enough votes to pass, after spending several weeks daring Senate Democrats to vote against the original House-passed continuing resolution. So we'll see if we see further talk about this minibus. Lawmakers will now have time to read over the bills, with a vote expected later Sunday evening. That later Sunday evening vote was the CR. This minibus, we still don't have any confirmation that this is actually even being floated anymore. And then it goes on, like I said, this is from yesterday, so it goes on to state some of the obvious things that have already transpired. So the Washington Times has the headline, "Who are the 8 Senate Democrats voting to reopen the government, and why? Why do they do it?" So it's led by Dick Durbin. If you didn't know, who's retiring from Congress. followed up by Gene Sheehan of New Hampshire, and then other 6 Democrats that are up for re-election in the 2026 cycle. And then it reminds us that senators hold 6-year terms. Senator John Fetterman, as we know, Pennsylvania Democrat, was the only one of the 8 who never joined his party strategy. He voted yes all 14 times in the Senate, tried and failed to advance the House-passed stopgap bill, which is the CR to fund the government through November 21st. But apparently, what was reported in Fox News says they're moving this CR to fund the government through January now. Because having a CR that's just going to fund the government for 10 days doesn't make any sense. Then it talks about Senators Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada and Angus King of Maine both signed. 5 of the Democrats, Sheehan, Mr. King, Hassan, Cortez Masto, and Mr. Kane, explained during a press conference that after casting their votes that one of the motivating factors was ending the shutdown's pain and protecting against future harms. Like I said, and Washington Times didn't mention a minibus, or none of the other articles mentioned the minibus that was in the Fox News article. Now, before I get to the Blaze article, let's lay out the political landscape. And it really goes back to all the way to 2015, really 2016, when Trump talked about draining the swamp. Okay, whether you believe it's a reality or not. Now, the New York Times here talks about Trump loyalists push grand conspiracy as new subpoenas land. The Justice Department moved an inquiry that appeared initially focused on the former CIA director John O'Brien to South Florida and is beginning to recruit line prosecutors, which is staffing people who will prosecute the indictment of John Brennan. But if you look at what they're talking about here is the grand conspiracy. Well, what is the grand conspiracy? Now, I've talked about this for ages. If you haven't been privy to the grand conspiracy, it is not what the New York Times calls it. I mean, this is just a conspiracy, but it's part of the grand conspiracy. And I'm going to tie that in as we go over this article. So far-right influencers, which I'm not, I don't consider myself far-right, individualist, extreme individualist, maybe. I don't know. I mean, do I want zero taxes? Well, it's, I don't even think that's plausible. And anyway, far-right influencers have been hinting in recent weeks that they have finally found a venue in Miami and a federal prosecutor, Jason A. Quinones, to pursue long-promised charges of a grand conspiracy against President Trump and his adversaries. Now, this is what I'm talking about here. It's not, the grand conspiracy isn't, the conspiracy against Trump was indeed a conspiracy. It's not the grand conspiracy, but it's part of the grand conspiracy, and this is what I'm talking about. Everybody's seen the pyramid, right? With, the occultists up top, and then rich individuals, corporations, and then governments, government workers, other people aligned with the conspiracy, lay people, and then the rest of us, really. That's how the conspiracy, that is the grand conspiracy, and the continuing thread throughout the grand conspiracy is socialism. And I explained that on Friday, that socialism isn't, it's not only a contagion and a conspiracy, but a contagion. Let's get back to the article. Their theory of the case, still unsupported by the evidence, according to the New York Times, a cabal of Democrats, and you can replace that with socialists, and deep state operatives, lifelong liberals in the government, permanent liberals in the government, possibly led by former President Barack Obama, led by the Democratic Party for the most part. They need to replace some of these words here for this to be accurate. Has worked to destroy President Trump. Indeed, because of what President Trump wanted to do is unwind what was a conspiracy. Whether you call it draining the swamp, and it's usually fueled by occultism and corruption, monetary, fiscal corruption, etc., and crazy left-wing ideas and destructive cultural I don't want to say norms, but radical culturalism. And they say it's not a grand conspiracy, it's part of the conspiracy, was indeed laid out in the 2016 campaign for President Trump, then as he was president, et cetera, and it led to all the impeachments and all this stuff. The reason there's a conspiracy against Trump, because Trump was the anathema of what they were trying to do, the progressive plan, the New World Order agenda, that really hasn't been thwarted whatsoever. I mean, that's the problem with Trump. He knows some things, and he's trying to do some things, and he's trying to straighten out the ship of state, but he's not affecting really the grand conspiracy, which is marching on, and we face dire consequences at the end of 2030. So the other people indicted, James Clapper, Peter Strzok, or will be indicted, certainly, and Lisa Page. And this was indeed a conspiracy and it leaked out, a conspiracy, a wink and a nudge, among many, to not let Trump take office. Why? Was not because they didn't like Trump, because of the orange man bad or whatever, is because they knew, especially once Trump teamed up with the Tea Party-esque political movement, people like General Michael Flynn, and people who were tapped into what was going on and knew how to undo it. They said he could never take office because of his pledges to drain the swamp, which means undo the way things work in Washington, or the conspiracy as a whole, which was laid out by Charlotte Iserby, is that there was always a plan for a one world system which allows for capitalism. However, most of the people will be ruled over by socialism. Carrot and stick approach through social credit score and UBI. In the face of oncoming technology and I'm sorry, I'm belaboring this, oncoming technology that is going to displace all human labor. Also, some breaking news today. We have this Reuters headline: Trump pardons Giuliani and dozens other accused of seeking to overturn his 2020 election defeat. Again, part of what the New York Times calls the grand conspiracy. It's not really a grand conspiracy, is it? The grand conspiracy is global. This is just part of this conspiracy. This is the undermining Trump part of the conspiracy. So I'm not going to delve into all the other people he pardoned. And it all ties in. It's the same thing with the January 6th folks, who were all pardoned, sweeping pardons for January 6th, because it was an attack on people, anybody really, who is backing this idea to separate the most powerful country in the world, the United States, from what is the grand conspiracy to build a new world order and to give up national sovereignty is the most important part, because you have to undo this idea of individual rights. You can't have freedom of speech and the ability to citizenry to own firearms and all these freedoms if you're going to have blanket authoritarianism. It's going to be velvet authoritarianism, particularly in the beginning. So, moving on to the rest of the conspiracy, not just indicting people who accuse the system of being rigged and cheating, which is exactly what happened, but the red herring of voting machines was just that. And Mike Lindell was actually duped by the Chinese into thinking that the way the election was rigged was through voting machines. It was actually the mail-in ballots and so forth and so on. But Just the News has the headline, Wisconsin lawmakers move ahead with election complaint changes. What is this? Republicans in the Wisconsin Capitol are taking the first steps to change how the state's election commission handles election complaints. Why would they do this? The Assembly Committee on Campaigns and Elections held a hearing on the Help America Vote Act, officially known as AB 595. The plan would stop the Wisconsin Elections Commission from dismissing election complaints when voters accuse the Election Commission itself of making a mistake or wrongdoing. Exactly what they're talking about. The Election Commission itself of making a mistake or wrongdoing. They were part of the conspiracy. And all this is to cover up, paper over, no pun intended, the misuse of mail-in ballots, lack of signature verification, allowing illegals to vote or non-citizens to vote, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And even the courts, and even the Supreme Court, were involved in, what do you think? They were involved in not hearing election fraud cases because there wasn't enough malfeasance to change the election result. And so they didn't hear it. But as I said many times before, it is what is usually referred to as tip of the iceberg, right? So you have a tip of the iceberg, which is if there's a little, there could be a lot. And if you don't look at the little, you'll never see the amount, I believe, extraordinary amount of election fraud. And so because the Democrats can't, they can lie to their constituents and win on policy proposals that will never come to being. And I'm going to get to New York City in just a minute. But the people in the know that what Democrats do is they get in power and then they want to lock it up somehow by changing laws. And so Republicans could never get anything passed, could never win in court, never get elected again, never certainly could get a majority. Because in the state I live in, Connecticut, the Republicans will never get a majority again. And it wasn't that long ago that we had Republican governors and Republican-controlled houses, etc. But that'll never happen again, just the way they changed the rules. And of course, it involves mail-in balloting always, because they're so surprised that nobody objected to the mail-in ballots. So what's next in the grand conspiracy? Real Clear Politics. Carville, Democrats will win in 2028. Congress will increase Supreme Court justices from 9 to 13. So Carville says that the Democrats will win and get the majority back, or the lawmaking majority back in the House and Senate, and they're going to pack the court. Again, this is one of the tactics they have to make sure that Republicans never win again. They don't win in court. They don't win with lawmaking. They don't win in taking political seats or running states or what have you. Because if it was a fair fight, they wouldn't win. That's why they redistrict. And they lie. They lie specifically to their constituency. And the only lie that seems to be working and has worked over the past decade is fear of the other. You can't vote for Republicans because they're all racist. And if you're black, as Biden said, if you don't vote for me, then you ain't black. And that resonated a lot. But some people are waking up, but not many. Because what are they offering? Handouts. And if you're poor or indigent, it sounds like a good idea, because most people that are poor and indigent don't have the intellectual capacity to understand how money is created. And so if they print the money to give to you, then the money they give to you will be worth less. If they tax people to get the money to give to you, then that will chill economic growth, and everybody loses. The rising tide or the sinking tide that lifts or sinks all boats. All right. New York Post, pro-Zohran Mamdani group pushes to recruit thousands to DSA in wake of mayoral election victory. So an effort by the group Our Time for Affordable New York could potentially triple or quadruple the membership of the powerful left-wing DSA chapter. Now, I got into this on Friday also, saying that socialism is wrapping its hand around the neck of America. And what they do, they want to capitalize on Mamdani's win, because they're not going to wait till his policies fail. So they want to do it now, and they recruit people into the Democratic Socialists of America, which is the same thing as OFA or any of these groups. They train you how to resist. Legally in some cases and unlawfully in other cases. So it's the same thing that the OFA did under Obama. They teach people how to be activists, and whether legally or illegally, how to thwart any action or any political movement that's associated with the right, individualism, capitalism, etc. Well, Mamdani gets his first blow. Postmillennial is reporting Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, says no to Zohran Mamdani's free bus plan. She says, I cannot set forth a plan right now that takes money out of a certain system that relies on those fares of the buses and subways, because it pays for itself. So if you give free buses, what you're going to have is less buses, because the buses won't get fixed, the buses that break down. You won't get new buses, so you'll ride around on old broken buses, because that's how it works. You have the fare doesn't pay for everything involved in running the bus, but it helps with keeping up with maintenance, cleanliness, training drivers appropriately, et cetera, and obviously buying new buses, cleaning up subways. All right, so let's get to this Blaze article about this woman, this Capitol Police officer woman, who has apparently been fingered by Blaze Media as being the pipe bomber on January 5th, which is considered the January 6th pipe bomber, who used fake pipe bombs, inert. Are they necessarily inert? No, because they did have explosive material in them because they're used to train bomb-sniffing dogs and stuff like that, but they would never go off. And as I mentioned previously, they had egg timers, the wind-up analog egg timers, the spring-loaded egg timers that haven't been made in over a decade. You know, they look like the pipe bombs that have been the props used by the FBI for years and years and years. So, if this woman, and I always said the pipe bomber looked like that wasn't, like that hoodie was just bought from Walmart, that gray hoodie. And it had to be a gray hoodie because it was a black hoodie. People would have immediately thought it was Antifa. So they didn't want it to be related to left-wing anarchists. But it looked like it was just bought, and the frame was small. So I thought it was an Asian person, a slight Asian person, a young person, or a woman. Is it this woman? I don't know, but we're going to get into the article. Okay, so former Capitol police officer, a forensic match. I think they use forensic pretty loosely here. For January 6th pipe bomber, sources say. Now, everybody's touting Steve Baker on this article, and I'm just letting you know I don't put any credence in this study. It's not verifiable. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying that it's not journalistically. That's why nobody else covered this. Because it's like they're asserting something based on a study that doesn't really have any merit. Scientific, in the scientific community. A computer program that compared the bomb suspect's gait to that of Shawnee Kirkhoff produced a 94% match. And I also have to say they have other evidence here, geolocation and all this other stuff that might put her at the scene. I'm not going with this. I'm not putting any credence in this. But let's just go over it. Forensic analysis of a female former U.S. Capitol police officer's gait is 94% and 98% match. So even the study, which is, I find skeptical, is not 100% match anyway. To the unique stride of the long-sought January 6th pipe bomb suspect, according to Blaze News investigation, confirmed by several intelligence sources. They don't name the sources, bad journalism. A source close to the congressional investigation of January 6th additionally told Blaze News evidence has emerged recently that pointed toward law enforcement possibility being involved in the planting of the pipe bombs. Software algorithm that analyzes walking parameters, including flexion, knee bend, hip extension, speed, step length, cadence, and variance related to Shawnee Ray Kirkhoff, 31 of Alexandria, Virginia, CIA, has a 94% match to the bomb suspect shown from video January 2021, January 5th. First of all, it might match, but is it conclusive? Which means how many other people out of the country of 350 million walk like that? So it's a match, but it's not like a fingerprint, which is unique, right? It doesn't talk about the uniqueness of a gait or iris, the uniqueness of an iris or a fingerprint or your DNA. These things are unique to the person. And so it might match her gait, but it also might match 10, 20 million other people's the way they walk. Kirkhoff, who was a Capitol police officer for 4.5 years, left the department in mid-2021, right after January 6th, right? for a security detail of the Central Intelligence Agency. All right. This is what raises the red flag. You have someone do something. I mean, who knows how long she's been with the CIA? But you do something for an intelligence agency and then you get a promotion shortly thereafter. Any connection, once CIA, always CIA, you know. This raises the red flag for me. I could care less. And they even said a CIA spokesperson, Liz Lyons, alliterative name, stated that the subject worked in campus security. And they say Kirchhoff's residence in Alexandria, Virginia appeared to be under the watch of law enforcement. A Blaze news editor-in-chief was pulled over by local police after stopping to observe her home. The reason is they're afraid because of this article for her safety. Because she's been named, and there's no conclusive evidence that she's the pipe bomber. Now, if you construct a pipe bomb, wouldn't there be DNA on it? We know what this is. We don't need evidence. We know what this is. As I said on January 7th, the discovery of the pipe bomb before the rally allowed the government to release, to put into play, to order certain assets into the crowd, into the investigation that wouldn't have been allowed, wouldn't have been legally justified unless this happened. So the reason for the pipe bombs was to allow the release of other intelligence assets, CIA and otherwise, into the crowd to do what they did. We obviously knew it was a Fedsurrection, to goad people into going into the Capitol, which makes it illegal. And then the media does the rest, you know. The mob killed police officers. All untrue. Then they talk about DC Metro Rail smart trip card allegedly used by the pipe bomber suspect to an Air Force civilian. So they traced it to an Air Force civilian employee, intelligence, who determined that while the man purchased the card, he did not use it. Well, how did the pipe bomber get it? The suspect allegedly used the card to travel from DC to a Stop and Falls church after planting the bombs. The Air Force civilian employee had purchased the smart trip card a year earlier. And then it leads you to believe, was it stolen? By whom? If this Air Force civilian employee is innocent, I really don't think it is. He is, or she is. Which is the same thing. It's like the speculative. The gun that shot Seth Rich was actually stolen from an FBI vehicle a day or two before the killing. So there's certain intelligence knows ways to cut off the trail or dead end. Call it dead ending trail, evidence trail. Then it talks about Kirchhoff was a member of the Capitol Police Department's Civil Disturbance Unit and a training officer on the use of less lethal crowd control weapons that were extensively used on the January 6th crowd. And we knew, because this was in planning for some time, right? Since the election. So as soon as they started planning the rally, intelligence was involved, figuring out how to thwart this. And intelligence has a lot of sheep dip folks in different agencies, and different agencies are used to assist intelligence, domestic and otherwise, into do what they do. And every major police department has liaison to domestic intelligence, which is the FBI, and it's not supposed to be. FBI is supposed to be an investigative bureau, not an intelligence operation, which it is. All right, enough of that. Let's move on. Zero Hedge. ICE has received more than 200,000 job applications from according to DHS. This is Zero Hedge. Obviously, there's a couple worries here. One is that you don't want, this is what happens in third world countries. There are no jobs in the private sector, and so everybody works for the government. But I appreciate the efforts into trying to remove and deport people that are here illegally. Nothing against them personally. Not like they're bad. They're necessarily bad people if they haven't broken any other laws than being here illegally. They might very well contribute to society. Maybe. But they're here illegally. Like I said, close the border, get out as many people as you can, and then we can talk about amnesty. Maybe. And just the news, ICE, Oklahoma officers arrest 74 nationals, half illegally driving semi-trucks. In another highway operation targeting dangerous drivers, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers in Oklahoma Department of Public Safety arrested 7 foreign nationals driving on the interstate highways in Oklahoma. In 2 days, they arrested drivers from 15 countries, all in the U.S. illegally. The majority had driver's licenses in violation of federal law and Oklahoma state law, which prohibits illegal aliens from obtaining commercial driver's license. During the operation, ICE and DPS Highway Patrol troopers working with ICE's 287G program arrested illegal foreign nationals driving semi-trucks in violation of state and federal law. See? Making it safe. We already saw the 2 Sikh drivers, one in Florida, one in California, kill people. And it's against state and federal law. New York Times, judge permanently blocks National Guard deployments to Portland for ICE protests. With her temporary block expiring, which is all she can really do. She can't really do a permanent block. But anyway, Judge Karen Immergut said the Trump administration had failed to prove that protesters were hampering the President Trump's policies. Really? You mean a continual siege of the ICE headquarters in Portland? That isn't hampering their law enforcement duties? I mean, come on. It's just ridiculous. Excuse me. And this is going to get overturned by the Supreme Court. Because the judge can't permanently block anything. She can put a stay, but she can't permanently block. I mean, it's just, it'll be overturned soon, very soon. All right, and this happened over the weekend. A shooter opens fire on Border Patrol agents in Chicago. Feds confronted by rowdy mob. New York Post is reporting. Authorities are searching for a man who allegedly opened fire Saturday on Border Patrol agents in Chicago. The shooter was behind the wheel of a black Jeep when they fired on the shots near 26th Street and Kedzie Avenue as the agents conducted immigration enforcement operations in the city's south side. Agitators also hurled a paint can and bricks at the agency's vehicles during the incident. Gee, Judge Immergut, are these people hampering the carrying out of Trump's policies? I mean, come on. DHS says the incident is not isolated and reflects a growing and dangerous trend of violence and obstruction. Over the past 2 months, We've seen an increase in assaults and obstruction targeting federal law enforcement during operations. These confrontations highlight the dangers of our agents face daily and escalating aggression towards law enforcement. Like I said, whether violence or not, obstruction is obstruction. These people should be arrested. So getting back to some more binding judicial decisions, the New York Times has the article, highlights of the Supreme Court arguments on Trump's tariffs. The Supreme Court questioning the use of a 1977 emergency law to impose tariffs on scores of countries raised doubts about the centerpiece of the president's economic agenda. What is this? Well, the thing is that things, laws, actions by the U.S. government used to be more tied to concerted action by the branches, particularly the executive and the legislative. But over time, the powers that be have empowered the executive more and more, and it makes things move a little more swiftly because democracy is like herding cats. It's hard to do things expeditiously if you're trying to get a democratic consensus, which there's, rarely. The article goes on to say that some of our favorite folks, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who was seen as a key vote, questioned the scope of Mr. Trump's reciprocal tariffs, which she described as across the board. It is your contention that every country needed to be tariffed because of the threats to the defense and industrial base. Indeed. She asked a lawyer for the administration. Spain? France? I mean, I could see it with some countries, but explain to me why as many countries needed to be the subject to reciprocal tariff policy. So now you're picking and choosing. Every country that tariffs goods exported by the United States or their trade policy, if it negatively affects the United States, is an act of aggression. Not military aggression, not kinetic aggression, but it's act of aggression. If you are tariffing goods when we don't have any tariffs on your goods, it's called protectionism. And it's aggressive. So if countries, doesn't matter who they are, if they wage aggressive trade policy toward the United States, then the United States should be able to do that, because otherwise it's obviously a threat to national security. I don't see the argument at all. And I know they're going to deliberate this, but I think Trump's trade policy is certainly legal given where we are. It's like, I understand that Supreme Court justices have to isolate their views. They can't really take it in an overall context because it doesn't apply. But if you look at the state of America and the infiltration of the communist Chinese and other foreign actors, really, everything that Trump is doing, every policy, trade or otherwise, is meant to strengthen the United States from a weakened posture, which we now hold because of previous administrations' lack of understanding, really, of how infiltrated we have become. Sometimes it goes to the extreme. The New Republic says, Trump says U.S. visas can be denied to fat people from now on. New State Department guidance encourages embassies and consulates to deny visas to people with obesity and other health issues. So you can understand here is that letting people into the country that may or may not have health insurance that would be a drain on social services if they come to this country and take free health services from citizens and others because of their health issues or obesity. Now, I guess if you have a visa to come here for treatment that you can pay for, then okay. Different. Speaking of getting paid, New York Post has the article, Nancy Pelosi is retiring. Not now, but in 2027. Nancy Pelosi made $130 million in stock profits during a congressional career. Wow. Not as much as Mikey Sherrill, but that is a return of 16,930%. Good job, Nancy. Basically what it was she would get insider information or what she thought was insider information. She'd run it by her husband. Her husband would tell her what to do, and she became $130 million richer. Also from the New York Post, you might have heard about this. BBC head Tim Davie resigns over doctored footage of Trump's January 6th speech and documentary. I really should have put this with the grand conspiracy the New York Times calls the grand conspiracy. It is part of this grand conspiracy because it's not just people within the U.S. government that tried to take down Trump. You have the BBC head, which the BBC, British Broadcasting Company, is actually a state-run business. It's run by the state and is full of MI5, MI6 folks. Just like the CIA has infiltrated all the mainstream news media here. This is something you have to understand. And so we're going to get to Kash Patel, his response also in a little bit to the Brits. The Brits are not our adversary. The Brits have been captured by the grand conspiracy. They've been undermined by Fabian socialists really since the 30s. So the undermining of the democratic principle, individual rights and things in Britain has been eroding and waning really since the beginning, before the Second World War. Post-millennial trans Condé Nast staffer, 3 others fired after confronting HR head over Teen Vogue layoffs. The union representing the workers, the News Guild, which was actually my union at where I worked. And actually the president of the News Guild now actually was my union rep for a time. Teen Vogue laid off their political journalists hired in 2016 after President Donald Trump won his first term in office as part of the so-called grand conspiracy to undermine Trump. Who knows how many intelligence-linked people were hired, but they hired political journalists after Trump. Why? Because they loved Trump so much, they wanted to cover his groundbreaking policy achievements? No, it was to undermine Donald Trump and to spread negative press about him. Duh. But they're getting rid of that now, because people have seen the tide here, and if they want to have any semblance of objectivity, which is a cornerstone of journalism, they can't have these left-wing loonies with ties to the intelligence state. So they folded Teen Vogue and put it back under the Vogue banner. Teen Vogue will now focus on career development, cultural leadership, and other issues that matter most to young people. 4 of those who were confronted the HR head over changes at Teen Vogue were fired, saying that the staffers all displayed gross misconduct and policy violations. The union representing the Workers' News Guild said the firings were illegal. Susan D. Carava, who was my union rep for a while. You, you run a company, if people storm in and berate certain department heads, that is gross misconduct. Especially if they're not on equal managerial footing. You can't storm. You could file a complaint. You could ask to talk to the people, but you can't harangue, because that's considered harassment, people that work at the company. You know, when I was the chair of my union where I worked, I would obviously take a different tack. Because I think, you know, obviously when you're negotiating for workers or people in your charge, you want to take up their issue, their right to file grievance. But with corporations, there's a procedure to follow to do it. And this has all been negotiated ahead of time, and it's in their employment contract. So New York Post. International Olympic Committee to ban transgender women from all female Olympic events. Hooray. Hooray to that. Transgender women are not women. They have an unfair advantage. In society, as Tucker Carlson just recently said too, it's like, in society, if you're an adult, you want to dress up as a woman, who the fuck cares? You do whatever the fuck you want. I don't care. But if you're trying to dress up as a woman to A, access women's locker rooms, which you shouldn't be able to do, to get an unfair hiring advantage, which some people are prone to do, or to get any other advantages by dressing up as a woman, or to enter sports, you shouldn't be able to do that. You know, it's like if I wanted to get into Harvard, so I painted my face black and said, I'm black, I identify as black, and now, so I get to get into Harvard. That's not fair. And I give up on this identity. Identity is a personal thing. You want to identify as something, who the fuck cares, right? But it doesn't meet the legal litmus test. Just because you say it is. You say it does. All right, moving into tech news before we close out. Vox News. AI technology race is a new Cold War between U.S. and China that could have devastating consequences. Center for Security and Policy claims Chinese Communist Party plans to flood the world market with cheap AI technology. Obviously, that's the way they do everything. They just mass produce and cheap crap, and then they flood it at cheap prices, and people go on Amazon and end up buying it, and you get crap. And that's what's going to happen. Besides, it's just like TikTok. The AI is going to have not only backdoors, but it's going to have interior programming that is going to work as a propaganda tool and a mind manipulative tool. So not just propagandize, but brainwash you at the same time. Kill yourself, probably. A report by the Center for Security Policy warns that the CCP succeeds at dominating AI by 2030, the start of the New World Order, which it will. It's the part of the New World Order plan was the plan asks or demands that Western countries acquiesce to the dominant global hierarchy and particularly Maoist socialism. And everything that comes with it, the surveillance state, the manipulative brainwashing, re-education, and social credit score, which is the bait and carrot of the UBI. Bait and carrot, stick and carrot. Goes on to say the sole and imminent threat to continued American AI dominance is the People's Republic of China. Obviously, the AI dominance race will be won or lost within 5 years. The threat is existential to the future of the United States and the rest of the world. Yeah, I understand all this, but the way he frames it is the same thing they did during the Cold War. They're using the Cold War of AI or whatever to advance technology. They did the same thing with nuclear weapons during the Cold War. We must, because the enemy is doing it. Otherwise, if China wasn't doing it, people would be like, I don't want to do that. It sounds risky. So they're fanning the flames of the impetus to do it, which we shouldn't be doing it. And there's more. National Review, China jumps on the transhumanism train or bandwagon. And who's driving that train? We are. Wall Street Journal, genetically engineered babies are banned. Yet tech titans are trying to make one anyway. Startups funded by some of the most powerful billionaires in Silicon Valley are pushing the boundaries of reproductive genetics, hoping to prevent diseases. That's the reason we're doing it, as well as improve the chances for a high IQ and other personal traits. Then MIT Technology Review. Here's the latest company planning for gene-edited babies. Entrepreneurs say it's time. The safety test designer baby technology. The new company called Preventative is being formed to research so-called heritable genome editing, in which the DNA of embryos could be modified by correcting harmful mutations or installing beneficial genes. The goal would be to prevent disease. Of course, they have to say that because otherwise it would be illegal. And they will be doing it. It's just one day it's going to flip a switch. It was like the abortion pill. Everybody was like, that makes abortion too readily available, too easy. But then Roe versus Wade was undone, and they're like, oh, we got to have the abortion pill. And this ties in with the article El País. First map of the developing brain provides insight into the origin of mental disorders. $1 billion project reveals critical moments during pregnancy and even after birth when the risk of neurological development disorders like autism, etc. Sure. 40-year-old neuroscientist leading the creation of first draft of the human brain. He's one of the leaders of the Brain Initiative, which I talked about often, which President Obama pumped $5.2 billion into brain mapping. So this article isn't about brain mapping. They already mapped the brain. This article is about being able to understand where mental disorder develops in the brain and being able to, under the guise of this article, prevent it or, in fact, initiate it. They've already been doing this. This was part of the goals of the brain mapping initiative by Obama, was mind control. And it's easier to mind control people when you schism the psyche, which causes a lot of mental disorders. It's compartmentalized thinking, and DID, a dissociative identity disorder. And that's why it has a lot to do with transgenderism. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. But other things is that if you don't have a schism, in most instances, you won't develop the mental disorder itself. In other words, they have to split the psyche, and then they use the identity behind your ego, to manipulate Manchurian Candidate-esque identity. I don't want to go too much into this because we're out of time. These temporal differences could be at the root of both human cognitive abilities and our greater vulnerability to genetic mutations. Don't listen to that. Listen to this next part. Our greater vulnerability to environmental alterations during development. And what they're saying is development is from birth to maturity, which really brain maturity, they say, stops at young adulthood, but actually your brain keeps developing well into your 50s until it starts declining. But they're saying environmental alterations during development. So from birth to any time You could take an environmental alteration and this is what I want to get to next. New York Times FBI director is said to have made a pledge to head of MI5, then broken it. The episode has contributed to concerns among intelligence allies that Kash Patel, brash and partisan, is also unpredictable and unreliable, not true. So basically, at a secret gathering in May, south of London, the head of Britain's domestic security services, that's MI5, asked Kash Patel, FBI director, for help. British security rely on the Bureau for high-tech surveillance tools. Not really, but yes. And we're not going to get too much into that, to monitor a new embassy that China wants to build near the Tower of London. That's not true. Asked Mr. Patel to protect the job of FBI agent based in London who dealt with that technology, according to several other officials. But the job was already slated to disappear in the White House and move to slash the FBI budget. And get the job back to the United States, saving the FBI money, and leaving MI5 with officials incredulous. What you have to understand here is that foreign intelligence services can do things that domestic intelligence services can't do. That's why they have them come in. That's why they have, let's say, the British come here to spy on Americans. And the thing with the Chinese embassy is just a guise. But to have intelligence officials with the MI6 over here in the United States doing the bidding of the CIA. Why? Because the CIA can't spy on Americans domestically. I mean, and technically, the FBI can't either without a warrant. And so to get around all this, they just have MI6 spy on people, or the Australians or whatever, or Germans a lot of times. And they're part of the Five Eyes, they're part of the Club of Bern, so they all share information. And what's happening with Trump, thank God, is he's saying, well, we're not really going to do that anymore. And that's a good thing. So I appreciate everybody joining me today. Don't forget to don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Thanks for joining me today. I don't know if I might have completely fucked up the stream because I had a false start there. I didn't have something plugged in. So we got a few joining. Thanks for joining me today. Really appreciate it. As I said, don't forget to engage the channel. Give me a thumbs up. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, live stream on many platforms, but particularly Rumble. And remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. Your brain has been mapped. So watch out for that kind of influence, and also the influence on others through genetics. The designer babies are coming. They're already doing this in China. They've already created clones and humans using genetic manipulation to create super soldiers and all sorts of crazy other things. And now American companies want to do that, so that's pretty creepy. But thank God the shutdown's over. I'll have a follow tomorrow about whether or not there was some caveat to the deal, whether there were some gimmies about hiring back furloughed folks or what have you. So thanks for joining me today. We'll see you tomorrow. Respect.
This is a conspiracy.
The New World Order.